Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and a highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. If you're someone who feels deeply, can endlessly think through how one decision affects everything else, or has ever struggled with all the things that traditional financial thinking leaves out, you're in the right place. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle their money, and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Questions? Please go to allthecolors.net and schedule a free 30-minute call. And I'm happy to share resources on investment management, money coaching, workshops, or anything else money and social justice related. Join us in this episode as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well-being is interconnected. In today's episode, we're exploring what happens when our financial reality shifts faster than our emotional comfort zone. I'm joined by Dr. Shay Harris-Pierre, a family legacy strategist and financial therapist who helps wealth creators and families navigate the emotional side of money. Things like sudden wealth, cross-class growth, and the complex relationships that surround legacy and inheritance. We talk about how our financial beliefs act like a thermostat, quietly setting the limits of what we feel safe holding, and how unexamined money stories can cause us to sabotage or shrink from what we've worked so hard to build. Dr. Shay also shares insights on family governance, creating emotional and relational structures that preserve connection across generations. Welcome, Dr. Shay, to Highly Sensitive Money. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And we met a few months ago. We met at the beginning of 2025. We were both Q&A experts over at New Dimes, and it was really wonderful to get to share the floor with you. And when I learned more about the work you do as a financial therapist, I was really excited to have you come on the podcast.
Yes, that was a wonderful experience, and I learned so much from you that evening. And so I'm glad that we were able to remain connected.
Yeah. I'd love for you to introduce your work and give us some context on how you got to what you're doing nowadays.
Yes. So I'm a family legacy strategist, and I come to that by way of financial therapy, and I come to financial therapy by way of marriage and family therapy. So I always quote Steve Jobs, who said, you can never connect the dots looking forward, but you can always connect them looking back. I may be paraphrasing, I may be butchering it, but something to that effect. And so when I look at my career trajectory, all of the things that I've done in my career professionally have led me to the work that I do now. So to start at the back, way in the past, my background, as I mentioned, is in marriage and family therapy. I've always been passionate about helping families to have tough conversations. And that comes from a personal place as well. My own personal experiences in my family, no family gets along all the time, right? And so witnessing disagreements and then being, I don't know if I qualify as an HSP, but being sensitive, emotionally attuned, empathic as a child, witnessing these disagreements and seeing kind of the dynamics and how if this person would just hear that this person isn't, insulting them or whatever, then this would not be an issue. So that's kind of been a driving factor for me wanting to enter the field of marriage and family therapy. And so I got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy, knew that I always wanted to help train. And education has always been a big part of my story. And so I got my PhD and I was a professor for a while, teaching master's level clinicians how to be marriage and family therapists. So I've been doing it. I've been teaching it for over a decade. And over the course of the past maybe 5 or so years, especially during the pandemic, as I've been a practicing counselor, I started to notice in my private practice that a lot of my clients were coming in with money concerns. And in doing my research, understanding how I can best serve those clients with their money concerns and money anxieties, I ran into the field of financial therapy. And I got certified, became a financial therapist, and since doing financial therapy and exploring kind of family dynamics, how they relate to money, especially in my work with couples, I have done a lot of work with people who are experiencing sudden wealth or who are wealth creators and who are navigating cross-class growth. And what that means is they are entering into or have entered into a new socioeconomic status than they grew up. And that comes with a lot of emotional baggage. It comes with a lot of weight and a lot of things to process through in order to hold on to their financial capital. Because it can be really easy to lose financial capital due to emotional instability, I guess. So that's where I am now. I help families to navigate sudden wealth. I help wealth creators, people who experience or who receive inheritances or who are selling businesses. I help them in their legacy planning process. So I help them to understand the relational and emotional pieces that are going to be important as they transfer their wealth from one generation to the next. And I help them to understand really what their wealth is for. So very long story, but
No, and that's beautiful work. There's so many questions that are coming up for me. But one thing I did hear is like you're a lifelong learner, right? You have a PhD, you were teaching, you changed from one industry to another, just kept kind of following your curiosity into money. And one of the things I always quote is that the American Psychology Association says that money is like one of the leading reasons for mental health stress.
Yes, and divorce.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of shadow work that can be like shoved into money and it just becomes about money when really it's about so many other things.
Yes. And that's at the heart of the work that I do as well, is understanding like the things that you shoved away, maybe, overtly or covertly or like consciously or subconsciously, the ways that you behave around money or the things that you're pushing away, the feelings you may be pushing away, and how that's impacting your relationships to your loved ones.
And there was one thing that you said that I've heard anecdotally of people when they receive wealth, if their comfort level is at a certain economic status and they're bumped up, then they'll do things unconsciously to come back to their initial, to what they're actually comfortable with. Yeah. How do you help people? I mean, how would someone know that they're doing that and that they needed to reach out to you for help?
Yes. And I love that you bring that up. I was reading recently in a book, Affluence Intelligence. The metaphor that they used was that sometimes our attitudes or our beliefs about money can work as a thermostat. And if our thermostat is set low or set in a lower place, then subconsciously our emotional HVAC system will operate in ways that maybe, we may get the job that has a higher salary, but if our financial mindset is still set lower, we may self-sabotage or we may, spend in a way that isn't aligned with keeping the money. Or, if our thermostat is set a bit higher, then our emotional HVAC system will kind of operate in a way that will support that will sustain that. So I think that I really appreciate that metaphor. And so how I help people with that is by helping them to understand what where their thermostat is set and what some of those beliefs are and how those beliefs are connected to their behaviors. I'm not sure, you probably have heard of the money scripts, which are, beliefs that we hold about money. There are categories of money scripts. There's the 4 main categories of money scripts, but then there's also, a money script in itself is just a genuine belief that you have about money. Maybe a belief is, if I have a lot of money, people won't like me. Or a belief can be, rich people are evil, or money is the only thing that can make me happy. Those are some money scripts that may show up. And so people may not often understand exactly how their money scripts are impacting their behavior. But again, in asking questions or, facilitating conversations like I do to help people to understand what their behaviors are with money and also what the beliefs are that are associated with those behaviors, we can bridge that gap and help I help my clients to understand how some of their beliefs may be fueling maladaptive behaviors and how some beliefs that they may have can fuel more helpful behaviors in their relationships to money.
Okay. Okay. So it's a holding space. It's kind of more inquiry into what is it that's subconsciously kind of motivating clients to go back to whatever their HVAC is set at. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I also work with clients to build what I call a money identity map. And in that map, it's 4 quadrants where we talk about who you are, what you've learned, what your values and beliefs are, and who you want to be. And so in the work that I do with clients over the course of, a few sessions, we explore that map and then we take things a little bit deeper. What does it mean? Like, what have you heard about money and where are those beliefs coming from? And then how is that impacting every other quadrant of that money map?
Do you have a resource that I could share with listeners for like the money identity map for people who are more introverted? Sometimes kind of doing these questions on their own will create like a really open, spacious way for them to start doing the exploration before they're actually ready to reach out.
Absolutely. On my website, I do have a workbook, a free ebook workbook it's built for couples, but it can be just as effective for individuals as well. And it's specifically like a journal-ish workbook that outlines some questions or reflection points for navigating cross-class growth and sudden wealth.
Yeah. Can you define cross-class growth? How would you define that? Mm-hmm. And what are some of the telltale signs that people are struggling with it? And what does success look like with cross-class growth?
Yes. Okay. So my very simple definition of cross-class growth is existing currently in a socioeconomic class that you did not grow up in, and that socioeconomic class being a higher level than the one in which you grew up. And so, yes, that's my definition. Your second question was, how do people know that they're struggling? There's lots of ways that people can struggle with cross-class growth. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is with wealth integration, the concept of wealth integration. And that is when you don't necessarily know what wealth means to you. You have this salary or you have this net worth now, and you're existing in this new, it's a socioeconomic status. It's not just the financial, it's not just the economic status. There's the social pieces as well. So you're in different social communities, you're in different, you're networking and being around different people, and that can activate different pieces of your identity or different pieces of identity. Imposter syndrome is the word I'm looking for. It can activate imposter syndrome. It can activate certain financial behaviors like underspending or overspending. And a lot of my clients come with that. It can also activate like deeper feelings of grief or feelings of survivor's remorse or feeling obligated to care for other people, maybe even at the detriment to your own financial health. So those are some of the things that can come up. But I think overall, when it comes to wealth integration, a big piece is that culture clash between where you're coming from, like your heritage culture, and the culture in which you're stepping into. And that leads into your next question, which was how do people successfully make that transition? And I think that success comes from understanding, and this is all outlined in James Grubman's book, Strangers in Paradise, an excellent resource for cross-class growth. But the way he talks about it is when you're navigating a culture, there's a level of biculturality where you've got your heritage culture and then your new culture. And oftentimes people adapt in one of 3 ways. You can either forsake your heritage culture and go 1000% into the new culture, whatever that means. And in cross-class growth situations, people often will adopt their quote unquote wealthy culture based on whatever they've heard it means to be wealthy. So that could be dangerous, and it could be misaligned with how a person actually wants to use their wealth. So there's that piece. There's also the option of completely ignoring or being in denial about your new socioeconomic status and operate. This is kind of like the millionaire next door, where you're operating just like you are still in your lower socioeconomic status and completely being in denial about the wealth that you have, or just in completely avoiding it. And that can also be detrimental, because then you're not enjoying your wealth. You're not fulfilling the purpose of your wealth in a way that is fulfilling to you. And then the successful way of navigating cross-class growth is integration. So understanding what pieces of your heritage culture you want to keep with you, and what pieces have created or like formed you into the person that you are, and the things that are just kind of, in alignment with who you are and what you want out of life and out of your wealth, while also integrating the new pieces of your new wealth culture and the pieces that make the most sense to you. It doesn't mean that you have to go and be a certain way, or your wealth has to look like everyone else's wealth in your neighborhood, your new neighborhood, but your wealth can look how your wealth looks. Another book, I read a lot, but another book that is a great example of cross-class growth and a really like intimate and transparent recollection of cross-class growth is We Need to Talk, I think. Hold on. Yes, We Need to Talk. Jennifer Risher is up here on my shelf. She shares her story about being an early employee at, I believe, Microsoft. And so getting in early and not knowing what to do with her stock options when all of a sudden she's a millionaire just after, working at an organization for a few years. So yes, hopefully that answered your question.
No, and that sounds very similar to like being an immigrant, right? Like you've got your own culture. I always feel like I was behind like my family's homes. I was Mexican, and then outside I was from the US.
Right.
But overall, like, how do I integrate both things?
Yes.
And I've always felt like, more than anything, I'm from Southern California, because there's so many Mexicans, Latinos in that area. Like that's where I feel that I fit in the most. I live in Mexico City now. So now it's like I'm struggling with being so American, so much from the US. And I'm hearing you say maybe not rejecting any of them, kind of understanding all of them, and then coming out on the other side, deciding which areas you're going to lean into.
Yes.
And being very, very being very conscious of what making your choices.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the metaphor that Jim Grubman uses in his book is, immigrating to a different space, a different land, the land of wealth. But yeah, that's where my work lives, is in facilitating that awareness, right? Facilitating that consciousness around what is your heritage culture? What is your new culture? Where do you live in between those? What do you want to take from that heritage culture? What do you want to take from that new wealth culture? And how can you build what it looks like, or what it means to you to have whatever it is that your net worth is? And then what does that look like for generations to come?
Right. I'm remembering reading some of Kendrick Lamar's story, and that his mom had Section 8 housing. He bought her a house, and it took her a while to let go of the Section 8 housing because it took her so long to get it. Like this was security.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned grief, I can imagine that grief of like maybe being able to give your children what you couldn't dream of as a child, as like when you were a child, and then experiencing the grief of, wow, this is so different.
Yes. And what does it mean? Like, who am I now that I'm in this new space? And what does it mean that I no longer have that thing? And specifically in the example you just gave with Kendrick Lamar's mom, if there's a level of like pride associated with like, it took me so long to get this Section 8 housing. This is what is security to me. This is, this is stability. It's really hard to get to a place where you got something else and it almost doesn't feel real. And that's what a lot of my clients come to me with, the idea of like, I don't know, I make this amount of money a year, my net worth is now this. It doesn't feel real. It's going to go away any minute. I can't spend $5 on this thing because I don't know when this is going to be ripped out from underneath me. And that also reminds me of I used to do early in my career, I worked for an agency in Ohio with low SES children and families. And as a part of that, I did a lot of training on trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And in the training, one of the metaphors that they used was because also in this agency, there were a lot of foster children and adopted children. And so there were a lot of family dynamics that existed where the foster child would be in a new home that was safe, by all accounts, safe and well-resourced, and they were, it was stable. But given the instability that they came from, it was really hard for them to feel that safety, right? And so it's almost, I would tell the parents, it's almost like if we woke up tomorrow morning and our traffic lights flipped and red meant go and green meant stop. It would take quite a while for us to really, every time we went through a red light, it would feel really scary. Every time we stopped at a green light, it would feel weird and unnecessary. And so until, we got to a sense of, oh, this is the new normal, things wouldn't feel right. And it would feel really, really scary, even though we knew cognitively that this is the rule, that red means go. So we're going to go through the red light. It would still create that immense fear that something bad would happen.
Yeah. I can imagine as someone who identifies as highly sensitive, I know that whenever I've experienced more stability or more safety, especially when it comes to dating, all of the other stuff, the older stuff that was less stable will come up, and it's that has nothing to do with where I'm at now. But I remember one of my cousins is a therapist, and she's like, that's actually a part of growth, that you're now in a place that's where you have more capacity.
Yes.
To hold things that happened when you didn't have capacity to hold them. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, absolutely. And having that sense of, is this really safe? It's a signal of growth. And it's also very common when you come from an unstable or unsafe environment. It's very normal to doubt whether or not this safety that you're now experiencing relationally, financially, in any sort of way, if that's real or if it's something that you can really trust, that you can really yield into.
And I want to bring in the social justice aspect of this podcast, because I remember years ago, I was reading The Color of Money by Marissa Baradaran, and it's a history of banking. And she talks about how formerly enslaved people, they were promised certain things, and these things never came through. Instead, what happened is that a bank that was created specifically for them, was embezzled from, right? So even if maybe in your family growing up, there was a lot of stability financially, a couple of generations earlier, maybe there wasn't. I think of the fear that people often feel with financial products that they don't understand, because maybe nothing happened to them, but maybe it happened to a neighbor, a distant family member. They heard about it somewhere else. And it can just make us feel that all of this area of our life isn't safe.
Yeah.
It's better to keep it under the mattress.
Yep. Yes. And I think that's why financial literacy is so important. But it's also, to your point, culturally sensitive and culturally aware financial literacy is really important. And in financial services, culturally sensitive financial services are so important because, financial planners or financial advisors or wealth advisors, if they don't understand that unique history that a Black client may bring in, that is in their bones, in their DNA, being stolen from, being the capital in this country historically. If those types of things aren't understood or taken into account, it may not be understood why the client may be, hesitant to, like you said, purchase certain products or invest in the stock market even. And so being sensitive in how you educate clients is very, very important, and understanding their backgrounds and the 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 harm that's been done to marginalized people historically.
Yeah, one of the tools that I've heard is to remind people like that was then, this is now. We're trying to be in a different scenario. I think of the Latin American culture specifically, where we've experienced so many coups of just like your money being one thing one day, and then waking up on a Monday morning and it being completely different because it's of inflation or deflation.
Yeah. That lack of security, that lack of safety, all of that lives in the body too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of as a financial services provider, when I'm working with people who have that background, I often will lead with just like listening to their story, educating them on what's available now, trying to figure out what their comfort zone is. What else should I be doing? I mean, maybe I should be sending them your way, but like, are there any other tips that you can give me as a financial planner when I'm working with clients who are dealing with something that happened to their grandparents?
I think understanding and knowing that every client's experience is going to be their own, and it's going to be very unique, and it's going to be very nuanced. Some clients from shared backgrounds may share certain, cultural experiences or things, but every single client that you have sitting across from you as a financial services professional is their own person, and their money story is going to be very unique. And so I think, what you've been doing is great. I also think that, understanding clients' money stories and the very nuanced and specific nature of their money stories and how they view their identities as impacting or being a part of or being integrated into their money stories and their money behaviors is super important as well. And then just being genuine, authentic, open, curious, not making any assumptions, of course, not stereotyping or, anything like that we don't want to do that for our clients, but just simply being curious. There's nothing, well, I don't know, I might be misspeaking. I don't know if it's nothing, but there's little that is more important in a relationship than genuinely being curious about the other person and wanting to learn more about them. And especially in professional relationships where one or both people are marginalized in one way or another. So being genuinely curious, being genuinely authentic in your communication with them, and also knowing that it's impossible to know everything about a person. And so mistakes or ruptures in a relationship may occur. They're going to occur. When I was a professor, I would always teach my students that therapeutic relational ruptures will occur. And it's not about avoiding them. It's about how open you are to navigating them, to addressing them, to saying, oh, shoot, I didn't realize that what I said was insensitive in this way. I really appreciate you for having the courage to bring that up to me. And if you'd like, we can continue to talk about, what that meant for you, or if you would like to share a little bit more about this. But I am accepting responsibility for my ignorance in that moment or whatever. And I want to learn more about you. So yeah, being open to ruptures in the relationship and open to repairing them and not getting defensive. Super important.
That's such a good reminder. That ruptures are part of relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I've often heard said that conflict can make a relationship stronger when it's worked with well. And I think as a financial professional, and especially someone who we will use a lot of my coaching skills, like all I do is ask permission. Can we talk about this? Can we talk about that? And when clients are like, actually, no, I congratulate them so much. I'm like, thank you. Like, that's really helpful for me to know, so that we stay within the lane of what's comfortable for you within this conversation.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's the slight difference between therapeutic relationships and more financial professional relationships, because in the therapeutic space, there may be more space to like push a little bit into the discomfort because there's a lot of growth that happens there. But in the financial professional relationship, there's like that level of respect is so necessary. And it also opens the door to trust. It builds that trust in the relationship. If you're asking permission to talk about, I don't know, family or history, childhood, any of those things, that lets the client know, hey, this person actually cares about my feelings. They're not just, telling me, talking down to me. I have some say in here. So I can trust that they will handle what I'm sharing with them with care and consideration and concern. And so maybe I will open up a little bit more. Maybe I will share how I want to buy a pool in my house because I had this experience in childhood where I couldn't go to the pool and it really broke my heart. And I don't want to just buy a pool just for the sake of buying a pool. It's not financially a responsible decision, which it might be, I don't know, whatever. But it's rooted somewhere deep in my childhood. And so those types of conversations don't just come in financial relationships where there isn't a level of trust, where there isn't a level of emotional safety and security.
And so as a financial professional, I'm both a money coach where I focus more on clients' cash flow questions, and then I'm an investment manager focused on social justice. I think for the money coaching part of it, often the space that we're allowed to talk about, that they're comfortable with talking about, is wider. And again, coaching is always kind of forward looking. I'm not looking so much at the past as much as it's helpful for them to understand it for themselves. But for the investment management of it, it's always really important to understand what clients define social justice as, what are their priorities? Because I know I have my ideas. But then what's important to them? Like some people are more focused on environmental, some people are more focused on changing capitalism, or on racial equity. One of the places, and I'll use myself as an example because it's always easiest. One of the places where I've struggled with cross-class things is as a highly sensitive person, it's like being so empathic and seeing other people not doing well and feeling like, well, why would I be allowed to take more time off to spend time or to spend money on self-care services when other people aren't able to? The way that I made it through that was by focusing on working towards a world where everyone had access to that.
Yeah.
With your clients who are focused on social justice and maybe using social justice to hold themselves back, how do you guide them through that? What would you suggest for them?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think with empathic clients and with, sensitive clients, it's such a strength to have a level of empathy and a level of sensitivity for the way that the world is and how other people are experiencing the world. And especially in working with, wealth creators, mass affluent, high net worth individuals, it shows up in their values and in the work that we do, me and my clients, and the work that we do in their values and what they want, how they want to steward their wealth. And so that's the work that I do with my clients, is helping them to understand what are their values, how those values show up in their financial behaviors, be it over giving or giving with a sense of, I'm trying to find the words, almost like self-detrimental giving, or as like a punishment, like using their wealth or like dealing with their wealth as a punishment or
as a burden.
Yeah. Trying to make amends for their wealth as if it's something that they should be punished for. So once we're able to understand, like, this is why you're behaving this way with your money, is that in alignment with the life that you want to live and the life that you want to create, or the world that you want to create? And so what's really beautiful about the work that I do, or the position that my clients are in who've navigated cross-class growth, or who are navigating cross-class growth and are in a stable level of wealth, is that they have the opportunity to use that sensitivity, to use that empathy, to use their resources to align it with that empathy and the values and the change that they want to see in the world. And it's about, not going too far one way or the other on the spectrum, not, punishing yourself for being wealthy and, giving everything away so that you then don't have any resources to, live a life that is, I don't know, comfortable or even just survivable out of a place of guilt or shame or anything like that. But then they're also not completely ignoring or burying their head in the sand when it comes to other people's suffering. So finding that sweet spot in the middle comes from the process of understanding their values, their goals, doing that deep emotional work of balancing, again, where people's suffering is, and making sense of the juxtaposition, or I guess the dichotomy of their wealth and other people's lack, and how they can help steward their wealth in a way that helps others to help mitigate that discrepancy.
To start creating the world that they want to see, right?
Yeah.
And for some clients, it might be getting more involved with political decisions.
Mm-hmm.
With other clients, it might be changing their investments. I know some clients will work to have a certain level of wealth, and then they'll semi-retire into something that's maybe more values aligned. There's a multitude of ways to answer that question, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, there's so many ways to live a life of integrity that is also a life that is, in alignment with your wealth.
Mm. So the next area that I'd love to talk about is emotional family governance.
Okay.
What does that mean? Is that creating tell me, what does that mean?
So family governance is ultra high net worth families for generations, years and years and years, have often or have needed to place structures and procedures around certain parts of their wealth. Think about the Rockefeller family, right? We've got lots and lots of dollars over lots and lots of generations. And there's the business piece where you're making the money. And around the business, there's also structures, protocols, policies in place for how that money will continue to grow and the businesses around it. But also on the other side of that, when you have a family that is that level of wealthy, there also have to be relational protocols and structures in place to ensure that the family stays on the same page. And so that's where family governance comes in. Family governance is the process of, or the product and process, I suppose, of creating those structures, procedures, policies in family systems that integrate with shared wealth within a family. Now, the work that I do is to bring that ultra high net worth experience or to people at the mass affluent and high net worth level of wealth. And again, specifically, I work with the people who are creating the wealth. And what comes with that is you're creating the wealth, you're building a business, you're an entrepreneur, or whatever it is that is helping you to create this level of wealth. So you have structures and in place around how the financial capital will be stewarded, will be monitored, and will grow. But where I come in is helping the family to understand or to build structures and processes around how the family will grow from generation to generation, how that human capital will grow, what specific structures will be put in place to ensure that the family relationships remain solid. Well, will there be family reunions or annual family retreats, or how will cousins know each other 3 generations down the line? Or what are the values in the family? And how do the family members enact those values? I was at a conference not too long ago, and one of the presenters did a wonderful presentation about the difference between espoused values in families and enacted values. And oftentimes the family will say, oh yeah, we really value honesty, or we really value humility. but they don't have an operational definition of that. And so it's hard to actually put that value into action if it's just a word on a piece of paper. And so that's where my work comes in. That's what family governance is.
Okay. And do you believe all families need that, or is that more needed when someone has more wealth? Like what's the shift where you would think, okay, my family needs this now?
It's interesting because I believe all families need it, but I also believe that some families may need it a little bit more than others. It may be more accessible to some families than others. Because I think all families need some sort of process for connecting with one another. Some families or all families need some form of the group chat. Like how are the cousins talking to one another? When are we getting together? How are we celebrating so-and-so's birthday? So at some level, every family has some way of connecting, but the level of formality will vary depending on the level of wealth of a family.
That makes a lot of sense because sometimes with more wealth, there are more complications. There's more structures that are being put in place.
Absolutely. And there's also more legal things, and when it comes to family businesses, there's shareholder agreements and who's in the family business and who's not in the family business, who owns how much, who doesn't. And then that also creates relational dynamic issues where maybe, my mother is in the family business and owns X amount of the business shares. And my cousin's dad, who is also a member, of the family, is no longer in the business for whatever reason. And he doesn't have that much. So there's a wealth discrepancy even within my family. Those types of things can show up as well in family systems. And so that's why the governance piece on the family side is important, to be able to have those conversations and to, again, keep those relationships intact amongst family members.
Yeah, that's making a lot of sense of just like the complications that can happen when you're combining business and family or business and friendships.
Yes, definitely.
Well, and I really appreciate a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned how sensitivity can be a strength.
Yeah.
When it comes to being empathic, when it comes to looking at social justice.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working with clients who are highly sensitive, in addition to using that term as a strength, are there any other tools that you bring in?
And working with
clients who are more sensitive? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think my approach and just like my background as a clinician lends itself more to sensitive people who are more in tune and more self-aware and in tune to the emotional and relational dynamics of their experiences with money. So I think to answer your question, I think all of that I do is very much in alignment with sensitive people, emotionally attuned and sensitive myself. It makes me a very good therapist. It also makes me very good at what I do just in general. And so, yeah, just being in tune with and curious and sensitive to subtle, tone different changes or word use, being brave enough to like sit in emotional experiences in the moment and not run away from those things, or to highlight, hey, I noticed you sat back in your chair when you said that. Let's unpack that a little bit more. Where did that come from? Or I noticed that your voice broke when you were talking about this particular thing. Would you like to sit with that a little bit more? So yeah, those kinds of things help to facilitate that self-awareness. But with sensitive people, there's already a level of self-awareness and an eagerness for more self-awareness. So
yeah, I hear that the eagerness, the self-exploration.
Yeah.
I often think of how much my friends and I who are highly sensitive, how much verbal processing we need, and that I don't take my verbal processing needs to everyone, because not everyone has capacity for them, which is fine, which is great. Something I've learned with time.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shay, so much for your time today. We've talked about the focus that you have with wealth creators, with sudden wealth holders, sensitivity was throughout the entire conversation. Money was definitely throughout the conversation. And I love how you're talking about social justice, how individualized it is to each person.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners as we start to wrap up?
I think the biggest takeaway is that there's a way to honor authenticity that is also in alignment with wealth and legacy and how you want to show up in this space, in this world. We don't have to cut pieces of ourselves off in order to show up in a certain way to make other people happy. We can use our wealth in a way that is in alignment with who we are emotionally, relationally, and just in general.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure to share in the show notes your website, the workbook that you mentioned. And I also know that you have your own podcast.
Yes. The purpose of Shades of Wealth is to destigmatize money conversation. So I speak in each episode with a person about their money story, where they come from, some of the things that maybe we've been talked about in our talk today. And then I also speak with financial professionals who give insights and share tips about, some money behaviors or challenging issues with money. So it's both relatable, relational, and also educational.
I love that. I love that. Well, once again, thank you for your time. It's such a pleasure to have met you and now to be in the field with you as a financial professional and potentially someone who also identifies as highly sensitive.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, I feel the same way. It's been wonderful sharing space with you. So thank you.
As we wrap up this conversation, I want to leave you with this question. What if your wealth was not just about what you own, but about who you are and how you relate to the people you love? With Dr. Shay, we peeled back the layers of financial success to look at what happens behind the numbers, the insecurities, the inherited beliefs, and the sometimes invisible conflicts that shape how families handle wealth. Dr. Shay invites us to see wealth not as a destination, but as a journey across generations, one where emotional intelligence, empathy, and courageous conversations make all the difference. Wherever you are in your financial journey, whether building, sustaining, or rediscovering your values, I hope this episode offered you some language, reflection, or simply the reminder that your feelings about money matter and that you don't have to navigate them alone. Thank you for joining me on Highly Sensitive Money. I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, and I hope this episode helped you see how money and sensitivity can work together while honoring our interconnected well-being. We have the power to create a system where everyone's needs are met because nature is abundant. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who could benefit. Your support helps this message reach more people navigating their own financial journeys. A thank you goes to Mike Schul for the music and Juan Antonio Nunez for producing. For more resources on bringing money and social justice together, sign up for my monthly newsletter over at allthecolors.net. I also invite you to schedule a free 30-minute call where we can talk about money coaching, investment management, and all things money and social justice. Until next time, remember that your sensitivity and deep thinking is your superpower.